It was supposed to be just another postgame interview, another night of flashing cameras, media questions, and polite applause. But what happened next left the world breathless. Larry Bird, yes, the Larry Bird, walked onto the court, locked eyes with Caitlin Clark, and snatched the microphone from her hands. In front of a live audience, in front of the entire basketball world. The crowd gasped. Social media detonated. No one had seen it coming, and no one could figure out what it meant. One gesture, one mic grab, and suddenly, the WNBA wasn't just trending, it was trembling. What could have possessed Larry Bird, a man known for his stoic composure, to make such a bold, theatrical move? Was it a prank? A protest? Or was it something deeper, something symbolic? Fans clung to their screens, analyzing the footage frame by frame. Clark didn't flinch. She didn't protest. In fact, she smiled. But beneath that grin, the tension was unmistakable. This wasn't some playful show. This was legacy colliding with destiny, and the result was thunderous. For a brief moment, the entire arena stood still. Clark, the rising face of a sport still fighting for its space in the spotlight, stood microphone-less as Bird. Indiana royalty seized control. And yet, it didn't feel like a power play. It felt like a signal. Something unspoken had passed between them. And just like that, the floodgates opened. Was this the moment the WNBA crossed a threshold it could never walk back from? Was this history writing itself in real time? The internet couldn't stop. Theories flooded the timeline like wildfire. Was it staged? A passing of the torch? Or was Bird warning Clark of something only legends understand? Whatever it was electric. Not because of the mic, but because of the moment. You could feel it in the air. Something massive had just happened. Something that would be talked about for decades to come. And the world watched, paralyzed by the weight of it. This wasn't about a microphone. It was about a message. And if you weren't paying attention, you might have missed the start of something much bigger than a basketball game. This was a kind of flashpoint that births eras. And as Larry Bird's hand gripped that mic, it felt like he wasn't taking something away. He was giving it. The question is, what exactly did he give? Caitlin Clark didn't just enter the WNBA. She took it hostage. From the moment her name was called in the 2024 draft, the game changed. She wasn't a rookie. She was a revolution wrapped in a fever jersey. The cameras followed her like paparazzi. Every pass, every three-pointer, every stare down was dissected and devoured by a hungry sports world. And the numbers? Insane. 19 points per game, over 8 assists, 5 rebounds. But the stats only told part of the story. The rest, you had to feel it. She didn't ease into the league. She exploded into it. The WNBA hadn't seen anything like her. Not just because she could shoot from half court, but because she carried herself like a veteran from day one. She was fearless, unbothered, and unbreakable. And she wasn't waiting for her moment. She was taking it. In a league that often asks rookies to earn their place quietly, Clark kicked the door off its hinges and said, "I am the place." Every game she played felt like an event. Ticket prices skyrocketed. Arena seats filled with people who'd never watched a WNBA game before. Social media buzzed like it was NBA playoffs every time she stepped on the hardwood. The Caitlin effect wasn't hype. It was real. And the league? It was finally starting to feel alive in a way it hadn't in decades. But with all that attention came pressure. Could one player carry an entire league? Could one rookie live up to a movement? Clark didn't blink. She thrived. Her play didn't just draw eyes. It demanded respect. She wasn't here for the noise. She was here to win. And in doing so, she reignited a fire in the WNBA that even its loudest critics couldn't deny. Still, behind applause and highlight reels, something deeper was happening. The league wasn't just watching a star rise. It was being redefined in real time by one player, one presence, one phenomenon. And that's what made the moment with Larry Bird so chillingly perfect. It wasn't just recognition. It was a confirmation. Caitlin Clark is the future. And that future has already begun. The Indiana Fever were a footnote before she showed up. A rebuilding team in a league that was struggling to keep the spotlight. But when Clark arrived, everything changed. Overnight, the Fever became front-page news. Ticket sales exploded. Jerseys vanished from shelves. And suddenly, everyone wanted a piece of the team that landed Caitlin Clark. Was it magic? No, it was momentum. And Clark had it in spades. The Fever schedule became must-see TV. Celebrities started showing up courtside. ESPN couldn't stop replaying her crossovers and logo threes. Suddenly, every network had something to say about the WNBA. People who hadn't watched a women's game in their lives were tuning in. Why? Because of her. One player, one spark, one cultural shift. And it wasn't just fandom, it was financial. The Fever saw a 400% spike in revenue after Clark's arrival. Sponsors flooded in. Partnerships multiplied. The entire ecosystem of the WNBA began orbiting around one rookie. And yet, Caitlin carried it all with the cool of a seasoned pro. She didn't just accept the pressure. She wore it like armor. But success isn't always celebrated in the way it should be. With rising fame came rising scrutiny. Haters emerged. Old school gatekeepers questioned her impact. Critics whispered about overhype, but Clark didn't waver. She just kept playing, kept winning, kept showing the world that this wasn't fluke. It was a new normal. And maybe that's what Larry Bird saw. Not just the stat sheet, not just the popularity, but the way Clark had shifted the gravity of the sport. Maybe that mic grab wasn't about attention. Maybe it was about acknowledgement. Because when a legend steps into your orbit unprompted, you're not just good, you're undeniable. Larry Bird isn't just a Celtics legend. He's Indiana's heartbeat, born and bred in French Lick. Bird is the blueprint of Midwest basketball grit. He didn't just play the game, he changed it. So when someone of his magnitude steps into a WNBA arena and interrupts a moment, people take notice. This wasn't a guest appearance. It was a statement. Bird led the Pacers to the finals. He shaped the franchise as president. His fingerprints are still on the walls of Indiana basketball. So when he walked out onto the floor and grabbed that mic, he wasn't just interacting with a player, he was welcoming a successor, not by blood, not by title, but by essence. To many, Caitlin Clark is still just a rookie, but to Bird, she might represent something far more powerful, a continuation, a bridge between eras, a second coming of Indiana basketball brilliance. The way he looked at her, it wasn't condescending, it was knowing. And in that silent stare, it was like he saw himself 40 years ago. The buzz in the building was immediate. People stood up. Phones went up. You could feel in the walls. This was more than postgame antics. Bird doesn't do things for the cameras. He doesn't chase the spotlight, which is why this move in this moment felt seismic. Something in him saw something in her, and that changes everything. So when he reached that mic, the crowd didn't cheer. They held their breath. Because deep down they knew this wasn't disrespect, this wasn't theater, this was something bigger than words. It was history touching the present. And the message was simple: I see you, and I believe. Speculation ran wild in the hours that followed. Was Larry Bird setting the stage for a mentorship, a collaboration, or was it a symbolic nod that no one had the words to interpret? Fans scoured every frame for clues. His expression, her reaction, the timing. Clark grinned, but that grin didn't feel dismissive. It felt powerful, like she knew what it meant too, like she understood that sometimes the loudest messages are the ones left unspoken. What truly made the moment unforgettable wasn't just the mic grab, it was the weight behind it. Bird doesn't give out praise lightly. He's not one for empty gestures. So when he made that move, it wasn't for show. It was something that struck a chord across generations. The past didn't just acknowledge the present. It validated it, and in doing so, the moment transformed from a quirky headline into a foundational block of basketball lore. Clark, ever the competitor, didn't flinch. Her poise in that moment said everything. She didn't yank the mic back or retreat into discomfort. She stood tall, smiled wide, and rolled with it like she'd done this dance 100 times before. And maybe that's what separates stars from legends. The ability to stand in the middle of chaos and remain unshaken. That day, Clark didn't just prove she belonged. She proved she owned the moment. Fans, commentators, and even former pros weighed in. Some saw it as awkward. Others called it epic. But the majority, they understood. They felt it. That mic grab was more than a viral moment. It was a turning point. The kind of unscripted magic that reminds you why you love the game. Not for the final scores or stat lines, but for moments like this, moments where time stops, history breathes, and greatness recognizes itself in another. What comes next? That's the question on everyone's mind. Because once a gesture like this lands, the ripple effects are inevitable. Did Bird just anoint Caitlin Clark as his heir? Is there a mentorship brewing behind the scenes? Or was it a spontaneous act of admiration that changed the conversation forever? Whatever the truth, one thing is clear. This moment changed the WNBA, and it might have just changed Clark's future too. Bird's brief words after grabbing the mic were sharp, simple, and unforgettable. We may never know exactly what he said, but we know it mattered. In that instant, it wasn't about male versus female leagues. It wasn't about rookies versus legends. It was about two competitors from different worlds recognizing the fire in each other's eyes. And in that moment, there were no leagues, no categories, just greatness meeting greatness. But in a world built on narratives, the question lingers. Was it real or was it strategic? Was this just a PR stunt? A marketing masterclass? In today's media machine, authenticity is rare. But this felt real. Clark's reaction wasn't rehearsed. Bird's timing wasn't polished. It was raw, it was human, and that's what made it seismic. The imperfection made it perfect. Of course, sponsors were watching. Brands, networks, journalists, they lived for this moment. Within hours, clips flooded social media. Hashtags exploded. Highlight reels spun the moment into gold. In the blink of an eye, a fleeting mic grab became a viral campaign. Suddenly, the entire sports world was talking about the WNBA, not out of obligation, but out of obsession. But take away the cameras, strip away the clicks, and what you have left is this: a young woman with the poise of a giant, and a legend who saw something in her that reminded him of himself. That kind of validation doesn't fade. It fuels careers. It reshapes futures. And it tells every rising player watching that the ceiling just cracked a little higher. Bird didn't give Clark a mic. He gave her the moment. And in sports, moments like this don't just elevate players. They elevate eras. Whatever else happens, this much is certain. Caitlin Clark was already a star. But now, with one symbolic gesture, she's etched into the sport's living memory. Not just because she plays the game, but because she changed it. In a single flash, the spotlight that Bird once owned now gleamed on Clark's shoulders. And she didn't blink. She didn't shrink. She glowed. That's the difference between hype and history. One fades. The other becomes legend. And from that day forward, Clark's name wasn't just written into the season. It was carved into the sport's DNA. But this script isn't just about two people. It's about what happens when generations collide, when old rules bend to new realities, when a game that's long been confined to gendered boxes suddenly breaks free. That mic grab? It wasn't just a gesture. It was a reckoning, a subtle but seismic shift that reminded everyone watching, this isn't your grandmother's WNBA anymore. And that's what makes this moment immortal. It wasn't staged. It wasn't polished. It was real. The kind of unscripted brilliance that breaks the algorithm. And as Clark stood there, smiling like she knew she was rewriting the rules in real time, one thing became crystal clear. This moment was never about a microphone. It was about power. Power handed off. Power accepted. In the days that followed, sports blog, podcasts, and media outlets ran wild with interpretations. Some called it a symbolic passing of the torch. Others questioned Bird's motives. But no matter where you fell in the debate, one thing was undeniable. The eyes of the basketball world were glued to Caitlin Clark like never before. The mic had moved hands, but the spotlight had found a new home. This is where things get deeper, because it's not just about what Bird gave. It's about what Clark didn't do. She didn't stumble. She didn't defer. She smiled. And in that smile was everything. Acceptance, confidence, ownership. She wasn't just handed the torch. She lit it brighter. Brighter than it had ever burned in the WNBA before. The legacy of basketball is built on moments like this. Small gestures that echo through generations. Magic Johnson hugging LeBron. Jordan nodding to Kobe. And now, Bird passing the mic to Clark. This wasn't a side note. This was a headline etched into hardwood. The kind of moment kids will study on YouTube in 20 years and say, that's when it all changed. Because whether intentional or instinctual, what Bird did was give the world permission to treat Clark not just as a rookie phenom, but as basketball royalty. And once that crown is placed, it doesn't come off. The old guard bowed their heads. And the new queen, she stood tall, mic or no mic. And that's where this story leaves us, not with a period, but with an ellipsis. Because the conversation is just beginning. Is Clark ready to carry the weight of the league? Can the WNBA capitalize on this momentum? Or will this moment fade into memory like so many viral flashes before it? No one knows. But what we do know is this: when Larry Bird took that mic, he didn't just interrupt a press conference. He lit the fuse on a new era, a moment that reminded us that sometimes all it takes is one unscripted second to change everything. And in that second, Caitlin Clark didn't just rise, she ascended. So if you thought this was just about a microphone, think again. This is about power, legacy, and the undeniable truth that Caitlin Clark isn't just the future of the WNBA. She might be its revolution. And now, with the world watching, the question isn't if she'll deliver, it's how far she'll go. Stay tuned, because this is only the beginning.